In a world filled with noise and chaos, we offer a cinematic oasis of thought-provoking stories and deep reflection. Slow down, take a breath, and let our narratives wash over you with truth and beauty. Click subscribe today and find your peace in our stories. I never thought a water bill could break open a lie that had been building for 16 months. It was a Thursday in February, cold enough that the windows in my kitchen had fogged at the edges, and I was going through a box of mail I had been avoiding since Christmas. That is what grief does to you. It makes ordinary things feel like obstacles. A stack of envelopes becomes a mountain you cannot find the energy to climb. I had been living that way since my son Raymond died, moving through the days slowly, doing the minimum, keeping the lights on. The envelope was from Piedmont Natural Gas. It was addressed to me, forwarded from my son's address in Asheville, North Carolina. The billing period covered December and January. The amount was $311. I set it on the table and looked at it for a long time. Raymond's house had been sitting empty. That was what my daughter-in-law had told me when I asked her, 6 weeks after the funeral, what she planned to do with the property. She had been quiet on the phone, the kind of quiet that fills up all the space in a conversation. She said she was not ready to make any decisions. She said being there was too painful. She said the house felt like a place she could not go back to yet. I told her I understood. I told her to take whatever time she needed. That was 16 months before the gas bill landed in my mailbox. Raymond's house did not need $311 worth of heat if it was empty. I did not call anyone. I did not call my daughter-in-law. I did not call my brother, who lives 20 minutes from me in Greenville, and who would have told me to think carefully before doing something I could not undo. I put the envelope in my coat pocket, went out to my truck, and started the 3-hour drive to Asheville without telling a single person where I was going. Let me tell you about Raymond before I go any further, because none of this means anything unless you understand who he was. Raymond was 31 years old when he died. He had been a high school history teacher for 6 years, and his students used to send me messages on Facebook after his death. Students I had never met, telling me that he was the reason they started caring about something. That kind of teacher. The kind who stays with you. He coached the junior varsity soccer team, not because the school asked him to, but because he thought the kids needed someone consistent in their lives who showed up. He had my build, broad through the shoulders, and his mother's patience, which he got in full, and I got almost none of. He had a way of listening to people that made them feel like the most important person in the room. I used to watch him do it at family dinners, the way he would turn toward whoever was speaking and just be completely there, and I would think, I don't know how he learned that because I never taught him. He married his wife in the fall, 6 years before he died. They bought the house in Asheville together, a craftsman bungalow on a street lined with oak trees, with a front porch that Raymond painted a deep green the first summer they owned it. He spent 3 weekends on that porch. I helped him sand it the second weekend. We talked about nothing in particular, and everything that mattered, the way you can when you are doing something with your hands, and there is no pressure to make conversation meaningful. Raymond died 18 months ago. He was found in his home office on a Tuesday morning. His wife said she woke up and he was already gone. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was a cardiac event. Raymond was 31 years old and had no history of heart problems. The examiner said it happens. Rare, but it happens. Young men with undetected conditions. I did not question it then. I was too destroyed to question anything. I had lost Raymond's mother to a stroke 4 years earlier. I was 64 years old, and the two people I had built my life around were both gone, and I did not have the capacity to do anything but survive the next hour and then the hour after that. My daughter-in-law had handled everything after Raymond died. She was efficient in a way I could only be grateful for in those first weeks. She communicated with the insurance company, coordinated with the funeral home, managed the paperwork that death generates in unreasonable quantities. I remember thinking that Raymond had chosen a capable woman. I remember being relieved that someone could hold things together because I was not able to. Now I was driving toward their house in the dark with a gas bill in my coat pocket. I got to Asheville a little after 9 in the evening. I turned onto Raymond Street and I cut my headlights before I turned the corner. I don't know why I did that. Instinct, maybe. The instinct that tells you to be quiet when you do not yet know what you are walking into. I pulled to the curb half a block from the house and I sat there with the engine off. The front porch light was on, the green porch Raymond had painted. Light was coming through the front windows, warm and steady. The kind of light that comes from a home where people are settled in for the evening. Not a lamp on a timer, not a security light. Someone was inside. A car I had never seen before was parked in the driveway. A dark blue sedan, late model. I sat there for a while and I thought about what I was looking at. Then I remembered something. Raymond had set up a doorbell camera the autumn before he died. One of those video doorbells that records motion and stores the footage online. He had also put a camera on the detached garage at the back of the property because, he told me, the neighborhood had seen some packages stolen off porches and he wanted to be able to see the full property. He had set it all up himself and he had texted me the login information because Raymond did things like that, made sure the people who loved him had access to the things that mattered, in case something ever happened, though neither of us said that out loud when he sent the text. I still had that text. I had never deleted it. I opened my phone sitting in the dark on Raymond Street and I found the text, and I logged into the camera account, and the live feed loaded, and I saw the front porch of my son's house with the green paint and the porch light on, and the door I had helped him hang the summer they moved in, and in the corner of the frame I could see the sleeve of a jacket belonging to someone sitting in one of the porch chairs. Someone was sitting on Raymond's porch in February in the cold, the way Raymond used to do. The way he liked to sit outside in the evening, regardless of the temperature, with a blanket and something warm to drink, watching the street. I switched to the garage camera. The back of the property, the driveway behind the house, the gate and the wooden fence that Raymond had built himself the summer before he died, a project that had taken him 4 weekends and had cost him 2 scraped knuckles and a very colorful afternoon, he told me about later. There was another car parked behind the house, not the blue sedan, a different vehicle. A white SUV, and it had been there long enough that the frost had started to settle on the windshield. 2 vehicles, 1 person on the porch. Raymond's house, warm and occupied. 16 months after his funeral. I did not get out of my truck. I sat there for a long time in the cold, and then I drove to a motel on the edge of town, and I checked in, and I sat on the bed in my coat, and I pulled up the archive footage on my phone, and I began to go back through it. What I found in that footage across the next 2 hours, I am going to tell you as clearly and calmly as I can, because I want you to understand exactly what I saw, and because putting emotion into it right now still costs me more than I want to pay. Within 6 weeks of Raymond's funeral, there was a man at that house. He did not come once. He did not come occasionally. He came regularly, with a familiarity that told you immediately that he knew the house. He knew where things were. He knew to go around to the side gate rather than the front. He knew which window in the kitchen stuck and needed to be lifted from the left side. I watched him do it in one clip. Lift the window with the particular tilt. You only know if someone showed you or you discovered it yourself over time. He had been shown. His name, I found out later, I will tell you when I get there. But in those first hours of watching, he was just a man in my son's house who moved through it like it belonged to him. I watched the footage in pieces across that night. I watched my daughter-in-law and this man cook in Raymond's kitchen. I watched them sit on Raymond's porch in the evenings, in the chairs Raymond had bought at an estate sale and repainted a rust orange that his wife had said she loved. I watched him mow Raymond's yard with Raymond's mower. I watched them hang different curtains in the front room, curtains that were not the ones Raymond and I had hung together one afternoon while his wife was at work, when Raymond said he wanted to surprise her and asked if I would help him measure. I watched all of this on a motel bed in Asheville, and at some point I realized my coat was still on and my coffee from a gas station an hour outside of town was cold on the nightstand, and I had not moved in 2 hours. I drove home in the morning. I did not sleep. I drove the 3 hours back to Greenville watching the sun come up over the Carolina Piedmont, and I thought about Raymond, and I thought about the gas bill, and I thought about the camera text I had never deleted. And I thought about what it means to find out that grief is not the only thing you have been living inside of. I called an attorney named Patricia, who had handled my late wife's estate and whom I had trusted for 11 years. I told her what I had found. I told her about the gas bill, the footage, the 2 cars, the man in the house. I told her about 16 months of silence from my daughter-in-law while someone else was living in my son's home. Patricia listened to all of it. Then she said, "Give me the login to the camera account and do not contact her. Do not go back to the house, and do not let her know that you know anything yet." Over the following 3 weeks, Patricia found things. The first thing she found was that the homeowner's insurance on Raymond's property had been transferred entirely into my daughter-in-law's name 9 months after Raymond's death. Raymond's name had been removed. This required documentation of death and a legal process, and it had been completed without any notification to me, despite the fact that Raymond's will had named me as executor of his estate. The second thing Patricia found was that Raymond had a life insurance policy I had known about, a policy his employer provided worth $400,000. My daughter-in-law was the primary beneficiary, which was correct and expected. She had received that payment within 60 days of Raymond's death. What I had not known was that Raymond had also taken out a separate, smaller policy 18 months before he died, worth $80,000, and had named his mother's memorial fund as the secondary beneficiary with me as the administrator, because Raymond had wanted to contribute to the scholarship fund we had set up in his mother's name at the community college where she had taken night classes when Raymond was small. That policy had been filed. The claim had been submitted. The payment had been sent to an account I did not recognize. An account that had been opened in the name of the memorial fund, but which was not the account associated with the actual scholarship fund. Someone had opened a parallel account using the fund's name and collected $80,000 that was supposed to go toward scholarships for adult learners at Greenville Technical College. I had to go outside when Patricia told me that. I stood in my backyard in the February cold with my phone at my side, and I looked at the bare oak tree at the back of the property that Raymond used to climb when he was 7 years old and that I had never cut down because he asked me not to, and I just stood there for a while. Patricia also found something that she told me about carefully, in the way that attorneys tell you things when they are not sure how much you can take. The man in the footage was not someone my daughter-in-law had met after Raymond died. He was a man she had known before. Patricia found communications through a process I will not go into detail about that indicated they had been in contact for at least 2 years before Raymond's death. A timeline that put their relationship beginning roughly 8 months after Raymond and his wife were married. There were records of hotel stays in cities where my daughter-in-law had told Raymond she was attending work conferences. There were shared expenses. There was, Patricia told me carefully, a pattern. I am 65 years old. I have lived long enough to know that there are questions that, once you start pulling the thread on them, lead you to places you prepared yourself for but that still take your breath away when you arrive. I had a question about my son's death. I had been carrying it without letting it fully form. The way you cup something fragile in both hands and try not to look at it directly. Raymond was 31 years old and healthy. The medical examiner said it happens. I had believed that because I needed to believe it and because no one gave me a reason not to. I told Patricia about the question. I did not ask her to do anything with it. I just needed to say it to someone who had the professional capacity to hear it without either dismissing it or catastrophizing it. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What you are describing as a legal matter is significant enough on its own. What you are describing as a personal concern is something that requires a different kind of professional. I know the right person. I will make an introduction if you want me to." I told her I wanted her to, but I want to finish telling you about the legal matter first, because that part has a conclusion, and the conclusion is the part of this story that I go back to when I need to remember that some things do get resolved in this life. Patricia sent a formal letter to my daughter-in-law's attorney 41 days after I called her from my kitchen with the gas bill in my hand. The letter outlined every finding: the unauthorized insurance transfer, the secondary life insurance policy, the account opened in the memorial fund's name, the 63 video clips spanning 16 months. The letter included a demand for a full accounting of all actions taken related to Raymond's estate since his death, a notice that a complaint had been filed with the state insurance commissioner regarding the fraudulent fund account, and notification that I was petitioning the probate court for a full audit, and the appointment of an independent estate administrator. My daughter-in-law received the letter on a Monday. By Monday evening, her attorney had called Patricia. By Wednesday, she had called me. I let it go to voicemail. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where I had opened the gas bill, the same table where Raymond used to sit across from me and do his lesson planning on Sunday afternoons while I read the newspaper, and I listened to her voice in my kitchen, a voice I had once welcomed at my dinner table, a voice I had associated with my son's happiness, and I listened to her say my name, and I heard her begin with something about how she knew this was complicated, how she had been dealing with a lot, how things had gotten out of hand in ways she had not intended. 4 minutes and 53 seconds. That is how long the voicemail was. I listened to all of it. Then I put my phone face down on the table, and I poured myself a cup of coffee and I drank it, standing at the kitchen window, looking at the backyard and the bare oak tree. I did not call her back. The probate hearing was 7 weeks later. I drove to Asheville on a Tuesday morning. Patricia was already at the courthouse when I arrived. We sat in a wood-paneled room with fluorescent lights and waited. The judge was a man in his 70s, careful and unhurried, the kind of judge who reads everything before he lets anyone speak. He reviewed the documentation Patricia presented with the patience of someone who has seen many things and has stopped being surprised by any of them, but who has also never stopped taking things seriously. He looked at the insurance transfer records. He looked at the camera footage logs. He looked at the Memorial Fund account documentation. At one point, he looked up from the fund account records and he looked at my daughter-in-law across the room and he said, "You were aware that this account was separate from the established scholarship fund?" Her attorney began to say something. The judge held up one hand without looking away from my daughter-in-law and waited. She said yes. The judge looked down at the documents and made a note. The ruling came 9 days later. The unauthorized insurance transfer was voided, and the policy restored to its proper form pending a state resolution. The fraudulent fund account was frozen and referred to the State Insurance Fraud Division for further investigation. An independent administrator was appointed to conduct a full audit of Raymond's estate. My daughter-in-law was ordered to vacate the property within 30 days and to provide a complete accounting of all expenditures related to estate assets since Raymond's death. The $80,000 that had been redirected from Raymond's life insurance into the parallel fund account was ordered returned in full, pending the fraud investigation. I was in Patricia's office when she called me with the ruling. I was sitting in the chair across from her desk, the same chair I had sat in 11 years ago when we were settling my wife's affairs. And I listened to her read the key points of the ruling, and when she finished, I did not say anything for a moment. Then I said, "The scholarship fund." Patricia said, "We will make sure it gets there." I said, "Raymond's mother went to school at night for 4 years while she was raising him. She used to take him to the library on Tuesday evenings, and he would do his homework while she studied. He told me once that those Tuesday evenings were some of his favorite memories. That library, that table, his mother across from him with her textbooks. He wanted other people to have that. That was why he set up that policy." Patricia said, "I know. We will make sure. I want to tell you about the house, because that is the part that is finished, and it is the part that matters most to me now." After the legal proceedings concluded, after my daughter-in-law vacated, after the estate was properly administered, Raymond's house in Asheville came to me. That was the provision he had put in his will, quietly and practically, the way Raymond did most things. He had thought about what should happen, and he had written it down, and he had filed it correctly, and it had been there the whole time waiting to be honored. The first time I went back to that house after everything was settled, I stood on the front porch for a long time before I went inside. The green paint was faded in patches from the weather, and one of the porch boards had developed a soft spot that I made a note to replace. Raymond would have replaced it immediately. I am slower about these things than he was. I went inside and I walked through the rooms slowly. The kitchen, the front room with the windows where the curtains had been changed, and then changed back again by the time the estate was cleared. Raymond's home office, which I had not been able to enter on my first visit after the legal matter concluded, and which I made myself enter on the second visit. On a Saturday morning, when the light came in at an angle that lit up the spines of his books on the shelves, he had built himself from boards we picked out together at the lumber yard. He had left a coffee mug on the desk. It had been there since the morning he died. No one had moved it. I picked it up, and I held it in both hands for a while, and then I set it back down exactly where it had been. I have been going to Asheville most weekends. I am doing the repairs slowly, the porch board, a section of gutter that pulls away from the fascia in the rain, the side gate latch that Raymond had meant to replace and never got to. I am learning the house the way you learn a person, gradually, with patience, a little more each time. The neighbors on the left side are a young couple, both teachers, who knew Raymond slightly from a neighborhood association meeting, and who said carefully kind things about him when they realized who I was. The woman on the right is a retired librarian named Helen, who has lived in her house for 30 years, and who brings me things sometimes when I am working in the yard, once a plate of cornbread, once a cutting from a plant she said Raymond had admired the previous spring. One evening in April, I was sitting on the porch in one of the rust-orange chairs as the light went down over the oak trees on the street, and I found myself talking to Raymond. Not praying exactly, just talking the way you do when the person is gone and the quiet around you is too large to hold by yourself. I told him about the probate ruling. I told him about the scholarship fund, that the money was there now, that his mother's name was on it, that it would keep going. I told him about Helen and the plant cutting, which I had put in a pot on the porch railing and which had, against my expectations, survived. I told him I was sorry it took me 16 months to open the mail. The street was quiet in the way streets get in the early evening in spring. That particular stillness before the night insects start and after the day's traffic thins out. The green porch glowed a little in the last of the light. I had touched up the paint on the south-facing rail where it had gone thin. I used the same green, the exact same green, because there was no reason to change it. There is a matter I have not finished telling you about. The question I mentioned to Patricia, the one I had been carrying without letting it fully form, the introduction she made. I will not tell you what has come from that yet, because some of it is still in the hands of people whose work I have been asked not to discuss publicly while it continues. What I will tell you is that I have been in contact with someone who takes the question seriously. What I will tell you is that they have asked me to be patient. I am working on that. Patience is harder for me than it was for Raymond. He had his mother's version of it, slow and steady, the kind that does not feel like waiting because it never becomes restless. My version is more effortful. I have to remind myself that some things surface in their own time, that the truth does not always move at the speed we want it to, that what matters is that the question remains open and in the right hands. But here is what I want to say to you. Whoever you are watching this right now, I almost threw that gas bill away. It came in a stack of envelopes that had been sitting in a box on my counter since December, and I had been going through that box on a Thursday afternoon in February because I had finally run out of reasons to put it off, and I almost threw it away because I assumed it was junk, because I was tired, because grief does something to your attention that makes ordinary things feel like more trouble than they are worth. I opened it because it had Raymond's address on it. That is the only reason, because his address was there, in the little forwarding window of the envelope, and I could not throw away something with his address on it, even 16 months after the last time he had lived there. Open the mail, call the attorney, pull up the camera account. The truth does not disappear, because you are not looking at it. It sits in a cloud server and accumulates clip by clip, timestamp by timestamp, the way water finds its level eventually no matter how many obstacles you put in its way. Raymond was a careful man and a thoughtful one. He sent me the camera login in a text message on a Sunday afternoon because he wanted me to have it, because he was the kind of person who thought about what other people might need before they knew they needed it. He had no way of knowing what that text would mean, but he sent it anyway, because that was who he was. I have been a school teacher's father for 31 years. I have learned from the best how to pay attention, how to show up, how to stay with something until it makes sense. I am 65 years old, and I am still learning. Raymond would have appreciated that.